back to the Straight Fire channel. We're here with Mental Health Discussions. We have our esteemed West Coast psychologist extraordinaire. Give it up for Miss Patricia A. Don, everyone. Miss Patricia A. Don, how you doing today?
Good afternoon, everyone. I wouldn't say that I am the child psychologist to the stars, unless we're looking at children, everyday children as stars, and we can do that. So if they're stars, then I'm a star too, because I certainly enjoy dealing with and helping young people through mental health crises. And when you're dealing with children, of course, you're going to be dealing with their families. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So if we can you just start off with, how did you get here?
Okay. How did I get here? Well, I'm the child of parents who came here from Arkansas by way of Nebraska during the Great Migration of African Americans out of southern cities traveling north for hopefully for better opportunities and a better life. And so my parents were married in Nebraska and they moved to California. And I must say they did that by car. They traveled across country by automobile. So I can only imagine what that might have been like. And they didn't talk about it much, except for in a joking way. My father had to teach himself how to drive. And he traveled with my mom and his sister and his grandmother. And so they traveled the northern route across the Continental Divide coming into California. So they came into California by way of Fresno before moving to Southern California. And all 6 of my siblings and myself, that's 7 of us, were all born and raised right here in Southern California. And though my parents were not able to get a high school diploma, they certainly believed in education, and so all of their children received their high school diplomas and college degrees. And now there's our children have college degrees, and our children's children are working on college degrees. So many things did happen as a result of my parents taking advantage of that trek through the Great Migration from the South to the North. They didn't think of it as a great migration, but that's exactly what it is when we look at sociological studies. We know that Great Migration really did impact many African American families and changed the fortunes of many families as well. So here we are. I got my undergraduate degree from the University of California, San Diego, and after then I went on to graduate school at Washington University in St. Louis. I studied under Dr. Robert L. Williams, famous black psychologist and tenured professor there, and he started a minority mental health program under the Graduate Department of Psychology at Washington University. And I was part of his initial cohort of students that he trained in that area to get mental health professionals into the urban communities as quickly as possible, because Ronald Reagan at that time was releasing mental health patients from psychiatric hospitals and sending them back to their families and back to their communities, and trained mental health professionals were needed right away. And so I was part of that training, and I'm so glad I was, because that kind of triage training, so to speak, really helped me in my career when I went to work not only in the psychiatric hospital there, But as I moved back home and worked in Kedron Mental Health Center here, that training really helped me. When I moved back to California from Washington, from St. Louis, attending Washington University, and I moved back to California, I found that I wanted to work in the school system because I wanted to work with children as opposed to adults. And so that meant that I had to go back to school to get to become a credentialed school psychologist. And so I went to Loyola Marymount University and got another master's degree from them and became a credentialed school psychologist and have been working with children ever since. So I've been in that field over 25 years now, and it's been challenging but very rewarding work.
Very interesting. So how long were you with the Los Angeles Unified School District as a school psychologist?
Over 25 years and counting. I'm still doing part-time work with them currently, but for about 25 years. And coupled that with initial work at the Kedron Community Mental Health Center, which of course is part of the Los Angeles County mental health system. I worked for them before I went into the school. So altogether about 30 years of experience in the mental health field.
Wow. How have you seen the mental health field change, in particular in the LA area where you've been working most of your career? Have there been many changes?
Well, to me, there's always been more of a need here because there are many people here. LA County is one of the largest counties in the country, so the need is great here. And I chose to work in the school system because I wanted to make sure that I did touch many of the students, because in the school system, a school psychologist has more of an opportunity to have a direct impact on students' mental health than outside of the school system, because teachers see challenges of their students first and foremost. Sometimes a teacher will see problems even before a parent sees the problem. So I had more of an impact working inside the school system. During this pandemic, of course, with schools being closed and children learning from home, I've been keeping up with the statistics, and it's showing that there have been a lot of mental health issues. I don't know if that means that there have been more, or that the fact that now parents are seeing what teachers have always seen. So there's still a big need, and there probably, as schools begin to reopen, there probably is going to be more of a need for mental health workers. It could be psychiatric social workers, school psychologists, counselors will really have to be very much on their toes and aware of what's going on with their students, because we've been locked down for over a year, and that's had a profound impact on children and their families.
Wow. Well, yeah, I can imagine. So what advice would you give to the young graduate students who are just now getting out of grad school and looking to embark on a career in psychology, particular maybe child psychology, some of them? What advice would you give them heading towards the future? What issues do you think needs to be addressed going towards the future in our community?
Well, I definitely hope that school systems will continue to invest in internship possibilities and opportunities for students just coming out of graduate schools and wanting to engage in a mental health delivery of services. I'm hoping that they will be paired with seasoned school psychologists and psychiatric social workers and the like, so that they will finish their training and get on the job training with students. So I think that there will be great opportunities in this area, and I'm hoping that many will choose to go into this area of mental health. I believe um, uh, mental health is like it's like brain research. It's like one of the final frontiers in life. I mean, we're learning things new every day, and we're learning how challenging it can be. We're, as human beings, we're social animals. I mean, we need to, our existence really is defined by our social interactions, and those have been tested this past year. So I'm hoping that more people will consider, if you think you have what it takes and the patience and really the love that you're going to need when you're in this profession, I think that this is a good profession to come into, because it's certainly not one that you can do your entire life. I mean, but so we need a replenishing. We need more, just like I was trained to help in what was going on in the 80s under Ronald Reagan. We're going to need help in what's going on now with the pandemic and the political divide and so many things that are going on in our country right now. At home.
You mentioned the pandemic. Now, what are a few things that parents can do at home with their children?
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you asked that question, because right now, like it or not, parents are really on the front lines too with their children. And so what parents can do is create an environment where children will feel free to express their emotions. And so we might have to get back to helping them to do just that. Start by simply talking about the uncertainty of the times. Let kids know that you're concerned about some things too, and talk about your feelings. Name your feelings. If you're experiencing some fears about what's going on, talk about that and be vulnerable with your children to the extent that you think that they can handle that. But when you do that, you're developing your child's emotional intelligence, teaching them to identify their feelings, noticing their emotions, and naming their emotions. And understand that if you have teens and tweens, they're going to express their emotions differently than, say, your younger children that you might have. So, some of your teens might be a little bit more irritable. They're expressing their emotions through complaining to you or whining to you about certain things. So you want to give that some attention. Ask them, ask them directly, what are you really feeling about that? And maybe giving an example of how, you've been feeling. Yesterday I got really angry with your dad, or I got really angry, and I should have handled my emotions a little bit better. So you're naming what you're dealing with so that they can feel free to name what the emotions that they're dealing with as well. So talk about those things, and at least try to have one meal around the table together so that everyone's facing each other. Everyone is in a position where they can talk to one another. No cell phones, no TV on, no music going, just you, not unless there's some quiet music in the background, but at least have one meal together where everyone can speak with one another. And you might have to start the conversation. Also, I would suggest that you know it's okay to have a quiet time. It's okay to have time where everyone gets to just be calm and by themselves. Everybody can have a little corner. It doesn't have to be a big space, but a small space where no one bothers you. Have some alone time, some quiet time. And then I would also suggest to have a routine. By now, of course, we've been in this pandemic about a year. So, you need to develop some routines that are going on so kids know what to expect. Because in school, that's what happens. Everything is done by a schedule. Now, of course, at home, it's going to look a little different. But, have a little schedule. If there's going to be a breakfast time, let that breakfast time be that time on a daily basis. If it's going to be a lunchtime, have that time where it's regularly scheduled, so that kids have a sense. When you have regularly scheduled activity, it creates a sense of safety and continuity. So those are just a few of the things that we can do as we work ourselves through, hopefully, the latter part of this pandemic.
How important would you say the role is that music plays in maybe the stabilizing, the healing of a child's psyche, or even an adult's? Could music help us get through this pandemic? Does that have a healing quality to it?
Well, of course, I'm speaking personally. I love music, all kinds. And so every day when I go for a walk, I listen to some form of music. That could be gospel music, jazz, sometimes even hip hop if I really want to step it up some. But whatever music that your children appreciate, let them listen to that. Even have a time. You can schedule in a time where, you have music playing, or you can have music softly playing in the background. It could be a backdrop to other activities that the family is going through. And at those sit-down dinners, you can have the kind of music that's playing in the background that doesn't interrupt conversation, but helps people to feel relaxed, because there's music out there that can help us feel relaxed and de-stress us. So find out about that. And yes, I do believe that music has a healing quality to it. And if you don't believe me, just try it out and see. Ask your kids, well, what kind of music would you like us to listen to, and let everyone have maybe sample a kind that each of your children, if you have more than one child and there's different taste in music, give each child an opportunity to display the kind of music they want to hear. That can be a family activity. And don't forget those board games. And we've been having fun with board and card games too, as activities that help to relax us as well as engage us in family time that's non-judgmental and definitely not stressful. Okay.
In terms of images that young black children get to see every day or have presented to them on a daily basis, how important is seeing an image of yourself, a reflection of yourself in the media that you consume? How important is that for a child? Because I've noticed that the mainstream media kind of lacks a lot of images of particularly dark-skinned children, dark-skinned babies. And I worry about the effect that has on the young black mind. How do you see this cultural playing out? How do you see it going?
Okay. Well, it's a good question and a good inquiry as well. I think that images are very important. We know that because studies have been done where, especially with Black children, where their preferences are, in terms of good and bad, and usually what has happened in the past is that our Black children have associated good people with lighter color skin and bad people with darker color skin, and hopefully we've come a little bit away from that. But I think when we talk about media now, there's all kinds of media today. So as a parent, you might want to have images in your house in terms of artwork that displays varying skin tones in the artwork in your house. If you have artwork of people, make sure that you have a variety of skin tones, from the darkest of dark to the lightest of light skin tones, so that kids will know that their skin tone is no better or no worse than any other skin tone. So there's print media, and you have control over that. We don't have as much control over, of course, what we see on TV per se, but you do have control over making your own forms of media. I know my son does a lot of work with his children in terms of making their own little personal videos, and I think that that's a good thing, because then they get a chance to see themselves the way people are seen on TV and what have you. Today, technology allows us so much more freedom to explore all the diversity in humanity. There's such beauty in the diversity of humanity. There is no, this is more beautiful than that. Most people are people of color. So, of course, in your home, even white parents should have pictures of people of color in their home, so that their children also understand that there is a diversity in the panoply of how human beings look. I remember when I had my first child, and my doctor had a picture display of the babies that he delivered. And it was amazing because no two babies looked exactly the same. You could find so many differences. So it's like all of the babies had two eyes, a nose, a mouth, but none of them looked exactly the same. And I found such beauty in that, because there is beauty in diversity. And, I think more and more as a society, we're getting to that, but we need to get to that very, very soon, because our children only benefit from that. And I could see vestiges of it. I mean, when you see children playing together, they don't have any, their natural tendency is to play with one another beyond how each other looks. Children are drawn to each other because they're both children. We start to pick up different kinds of negativity as we get older, and that's kind of taught. But I think that as a society, I must say, we're moving away from it. And I'm so glad that we are, because it can do nothing but good for us, for our children to know that the outside of us is very superficial. It's what's inside of us that really counts. And so I think that if this pandemic hasn't taught us anything else, it's like, when all is said and done, we're all on the same playing field, because a virus doesn't care what color you are. Mm-hmm.
Are there any other current events that you would like to touch on? Anything that you've been affected by personally in the news? Any news stories that have hit close to home lately?
Well, I think that I'm very saddened by the continuation of hate crimes and um, man's inhumanity to man. I'm praying so much that, particularly, I'm concerned about white males and the continuing of the fear of losing your um, white superiority. That, because really, it we've got to get rid of that. And I'm hoping that more and more white males will start having conversations with one another about the behaviors that we're seeing. I remember during the Obama administration, there were so many atrocities that happened and that involved guns and weapons, and most of those were perpetrated by white males. There were some other males in there too, but mostly white males shooting up in their schools. And just recently, a white male allegedly, killing women in these spas, and the blame being put more on the victim than the person, the victimizer. It's just something is going on there, and I think that society really has to deal with that. And I don't want to sound racist myself, but I'm noticing that a lot of these things are being perpetrated by white males, and I think that if white males would start talking to one another about what's going on with them, we could be moving in the right direction in that way, because
It's interesting that you bring up the white male perspective in terms of that particular incident. But with incidents that are like that, similar situations where the white male has gone in or has massacred numerous people. We think of the young boy that killed the 9 African Americans in the church.
right.
But what I notice is the media is quick to offer the mental health, which we're talking about now, as an excuse or validation for their need to fulfill this carnal instinct of murder. They, in particular, one of the headlines I read said the perpetrator had a bad day. He was having a bad day, and I just thought that was, beyond empathetic. That was empathy, the likes of which they never afford any other perpetrators of crime. So I wanted to know, have you noticed that same scenario happening over and over again?
Mm-hmm. I'm not an expert in that area, but I certainly have noticed it, and frankly speaking, that's how even when they don't mention the race or ethnic background of a perpetrator, the fact that they don't mention it and they start talking about the perpetrator as if we need to feel sorry for them automatically lets me know it's probably a white male. Because if it's another male, if it's, say, for example, an African American male that's the perpetrator, we're going to know that because his behavior is immediately criminalized. So we'll know that it's a person of color or an African American or even an Asian when they start talking about the perpetrator in criminal sense. It's even like the killing of George Floyd, even in front of everyone. We sympathize with the officer, even though we saw the officer using the kind of methods that he did not need to use on this perpetrator, on George Floyd. But because the officer was white, we immediately take his side, and so something is wrong with that. And I don't know, I can't really say why this is, but it does not seem. Not only does it not seem fair, but it almost seems insane to blame victims, of such heinous behavior and crimes perpetrated by white males. So I'm hoping that we'll be dealing with those. I think that that something needs to be done, but I think it starts with honest conversation, and I think that probably the only ones that really can have those conversations really are other white males that see this behavior as well and need to call it out in their peer groups.
Wow. That's a mouthful right there. Well, personally, I went to school and majored in mass media studies. And at the time, it didn't seem like that significant of a major. But, fast forward about 20 years or so, and I feel like I'm at the eye of the storm because I can see things coming before it seems like the masses see them coming. Or I can see that the media manipulates the American public in such a way that it leaves them so uninformed. And it's really worrisome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Well, in conclusion, this has been a very fruitful discussion on the topic of mental health. You're a very busy person. We're not going to hold you for much longer, Doctor. Any last words for the family, for the community, for the children, for the youth, for the future? Anything you want to leave them with any words of wisdom, encouragement?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say this. I think that that we're moving in the right direction. I think that ultimately we've seen that mental health is just as important as physical health in terms of how it should be looked at and it should be treated. And so I think that mental health needs to be made information about our mental health needs to be made available to the public as a whole. And I think that mental health professionals and services should also be made available. Our country needs to move in the direction of universal health care, because if people are still struggling when they get sick, whether that's mental illness or physical illness, and they don't have anywhere to turn to get well, something is wrong there. We're living in one of the most richest nations in the world. So one of the things that to me defines a rich nation is how it takes care of its people. And so we need to be addressing issues of mental wellness. And I see a lot of things are out with that, but I don't want that to just be made available for people who have the means to get it. I think that those things have to be made available. Resources have to be made available to everyone, and particularly our young people. So if I had to leave you with anything else, take care of yourself. Say something positive to yourself every single day, and recognize how you're feeling. And if those feelings get out of control, talk to someone about them.
All right. Well, Ms. Patricia Don, I'd like to thank you so much on behalf of the Straight Fire channel, The Opposite Effect. And thank you for joining us. This has been The Opposite Effect with RJ Dodson. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
Your engineer right there, that was Stephanie.